Welcome to the Power of ERDC podcast. I'm your host, Shelley Tingle with the U.S. Army Engineer Research and Development Center. In a contested environment, ports are no longer guaranteed access points. They are targets, choke points, and decisive terrain that can determine the success or failure of global operations. Today, we are joined by Dr. Aaron Byrd, Research Civil Engineer. His work focuses on how the Army understands, assesses, and rapidly adapts port infrastructure in contested and degraded environments. Welcome, Dr. Byrd.
Thank you.
And so can you introduce us to what you do at ERDC? What is your role at ERDC and how your work supports logistics operations?
Happy to. So I've been at ERDC for close to 25 years now. It's been a long time. I've worked in many different areas, but a lot of them involve simulations and modeling, understanding how to integrate models across different domains. Recently, my work's been focused on how to have contested logistics data sets and engineering capabilities that we can bring to bear, that we can allow the soldiers to use when they're out in the field and they're trying to work planning problems that they have. So we've stood up a whole web platform that lets us have a variety of different web apps that our soldiers can have access to. So when they're trying to plan contested logistics operations, they can have the tools ready at their fingertips.
And so what capability gaps led to the development of two of your applications, Port and Spear?
Port is an interesting one. It started out in 2014. There was an Operation United Assistance, and the Department of War was providing support to the Ebola problem in Africa, and they were trying to send the hospital ships to go support them and provide assistance on the ground. There's a large outbreak. En route, the big hospital ship was going to go to Port Buchanan, and en route, the port requested some funding to allow them to stop there, and we politely declined. And then, so that set off a multi-day, multi-agency scramble to figure out where could these hospital ships dock, like where was appropriate. How could we, somewhere not too far away, but yet, fits the ship and can actually offload supplies and get the, make the mission happen still, right? So this was a multi-agency, multi-day affair where everybody's scrambling, looking through reports, pulling stuff off the shelves, pulling up old hard drives and trying to get them to work to dig out old reports, running, asking NOAA, like, hey, what information do you have? And so from that experience, we recognized that there's a real need for global port information to help us, that we can have at our fingertips, to help us really sort of dig down into what's where, how can we find out what ports are mission ready for different scenarios, right, at a moment's notice. For Spear, this was kind of the follow-on question where we're looking at, now we've picked out a port, we've picked out a location, that's good, but in a contested environment, all of our major world-class ports are probably going to be denied to us, right? They're well known. Everybody knows how critical they are for logistics and sustainment operations. And if our enemies can stop those operations, they can stop us before we can even start. So Spear is all about how do we assess alternative locations, ports that are not in such great shape, backup ports or backup locations, or even how do we do logistics over the shore so that we could say, we don't have a port. How do we get everything onto the sand and off to a staging area where we can move it forward, right? So how do we look at these types of scenarios, there's thousands of ports around the world that are not these world-class ports. So we need to be able to rapidly assess those for mission fitness and figure out how do we actually make those situations work when we are down to, short time frames and missions are already happening and things need to happen quickly, right? So that's fear.
So, what does port enable that was previously not available for planners? So, you told us a little bit about the hospitals ships that could not get to where they needed to be, and so fast forward from 2014 to today. So now, what does it enable that was just not previously available?
So there's two real capabilities that it has. The first is it brings together a whole data sets of global port information. We went out, we collected multiple different data sets from, military data sets, publicly available data sets. We also had our own CHL data set that we had derived from an earlier project looking at austere locations and which ones would make good locations. And so the first real capability that the port gives us is this single look at global port database, right? To really assess and understand, dig down into what's there, what, refueling capabilities, repair capabilities, garbage pickup, all these sort of information that you want to know about a port just at a first glance, like, does this port even make sense? What am I worried about? What doesn't it have, right? We've got that now at our fingertips. The second thing that port does for us is really layers on top of all of that, the engineering assessments that we work through. So because we have the data, but we're also developing this as an app, right? We can layer on top of the data all of our engineering assessments. So now we can look at fitness for mission, right? So we can say, oh, I have a ship X, whether it's the Abraham Lincoln or the Mercy or the Donald Cook or whatever. I need to figure out where this thing could fit so that I could dock there, right, out of the thousands or hundreds in some random part of the world. And, oh, my mission is humanitarian assistance, right? So now I need, acres of storage space where I can offload goods. Or maybe it's a power projection. I need to offload containers and, get troops on the ground quickly, right? So we can look at the ability of the port to support the ship and also the operation so that we can say, what's there? How does it work, right? And then at the end, it's just a few clicks. You start from the big screen with all the ports and you go, I'm interested in this area, click, draw a circle. Okay, next step. Well, where don't you want to go, right? So we can add in things like there's enemy activity in this location, countries we don't want to worry about. Okay, next phase, which ship are you trying to put where? What's your mission space? A couple clicks there. Next, we do your analysis and it pulls up the green, amber, red list of places you can go. It has a little map so that you can say, click on one, zooms around, you can see the context for where it's at, where does it fit your mission space, how close is it, far away. And then you can start to go, okay, these top 3 green ones, those are my first ones I need to assess, right? So port is all about getting us from, I have no idea about ports in a few clicks to, here's my top 1, 2, 3 ports I need to dig into further and go, okay, these ones are really the ones I need to focus on for my mission assessment.
It is actually very incredible. I wish that in another format, we could show our audience the actual app. It is very incredible on how you are able to filter through all the ports all over the world and say, okay, I have this ship, I have this mission, this is where I don't want to go, and it gives you those decisions instantly. So how does port integrate global data into actual insight? You hinted at that you were already collecting data from decades of research that Coastal Hydraulics Lab, CHL, had already been doing along with NOAA. So tell me a little bit about all of that data collection and how is that integrated to give decision makers the right information at the right time?
Yeah, we spent months going through multiple different data sets, the NGA data set, Lloyd's had a data set. There was other, World Port Index data sets. We brought in our data set and we laid it all out into big ginormous spreadsheets, and we said, okay, what's the data that all of these things have? And then what we did is we cross-referenced it with doctrine, and we said, okay, what are the questions everybody is asking about ports? Like, how many bursts does it have? Does all these sort of things. We had a whole list of questions that we pulled from doctrine, and we said, okay, do we have the data to answer these things? Can we say, here's the question, here's the data source? And then in the end, we pulled together the giant list of all of the ports. We've got over 7,000 ports now around the world, right? And so it really lets us get at, under the hood, things like what size cranes are available at the port, what's the depth at the berth, what's the channel depth, storage area sizes, right? Those sorts of things. And then we have, for our austere ports, obviously they're beaches, right? So there's not a whole lot there. But what we also have in ports is the ability to say, okay, let me start looking at JLOS operations and say, okay, this is a beach, but I'm thinking I have this kind of Army watercraft vessels that could support a JLOS operations. Let me draw out the beach and see if I can fit the lane. So all the watercraft by doctrine are required to have certain lane widths and buffers and things like that. So we have that doctrine sort of built into the assessment tool. So we can look at, does a port fit your world-class port fit your mission needs? Like, you've got cranes in space, but also does an austere port fit your lots, logistics over the shore types of operations, so that you can quickly see, do we fit? Do we have, is it too small, too big, plenty of space, that sort of thing, so that you can move forward quickly with your analysis. And all that's done just in a few clicks.
And that's amazing. So if we're going to now move to Spear, the other tool that you are developing, what specific capabilities does Sphere bring to rapid port assessment and rapid planning?
So Spear is really all about the next question, right? So once you've identified the ports that you're interested in, the top 2 or 3, right? The follow-on question is, okay, which one is the better one, right? Why, right? And what that really comes down to is how quickly you can get all your stuff off your ship onto the shore and moving forward, right? The speed at which that happens. That's called the throughput. So our throughput analysis is the first key step of Spear. So it really does 2 things. One is it enables us to rapidly assess throughput. So we can quickly set up scenarios and then click go, and we can see all the plots of, like, okay, here's how much stuff is on your ship at the beginning. We go down to 0, right? Here's how much stuff is in our crisp yard at the beginning, 0, right? Here it goes up to, like, okay, in 56 hours, we managed to get, 2,000 containers from off the ship to our, storage yard on shore, right? So it lets us simulate different stages and start to understand, okay, how does the whole logistics chain work, right? The other part that Spear does is it lets us dig into not just the logistics part, but the engineering side, right? So when we're looking at all of the logistics side, we're kind of assuming a lot of the infrastructure is sufficient, right? Well, that's not always the case, especially in a contested scenario where we're going to be using piers or quays that probably didn't get a lot of maintenance over the years. They're, not quite up to military spec, right? So we're going to need to assess them and sort of understand what is their structural capacity, right? If we're pulling up to a pier and trying to offload some tanks and the pier collapses, mission fails, right? It doesn't matter what our throughput numbers were. So that's the other half of Spear, is looking at the structural capacity of the infrastructure. So what we're doing is, there was another ERDC project a few years earlier looking at how do we retrofit piers and quays to improve their structural capacity, right? So we have the other part of Spear is the tool that lets us look at that infrastructure and then go, okay, what's our repair plan? Like, if we need to get some containers that are several tons, off, roll those. Now we got tanks that were coming off. They're really heavy, right? What do we need to do expediently, right? This isn't a full-blown repair, replace thing. It's we got to get the mission happening in 2 days kind of a deal. How do we fix them so that they have the structural capacity sufficient, so that when we offload all of our stuff, we're good to go, right?
And so you've worked decades actually on all the science that goes into Sphere and Port of taking all that information and then basically developing a tech transfer app that lets these decision makers know exactly what to do and when. So, how do Port and Spear reduce these decision timelines for the men and women out there that are having to make these decisions of this is where this ship needs to go. It's in a contested environment. We have this amount of cargo. So, as far as operation and planning, how does that impact those timelines that they're up against?
Right now, like those timelines are days to weeks, right? With the throughput planning, with the engineering assessments. Um, Transcom is the one who kind of has the mission space of like, let's plan the logistics of how we get on shore and bringing in ships from overseas. There's Navy components to who goes and assesses ports and who sort of says, okay, yeah, this is actually good. There's the Army side of things that's managing all of the logistics and pushing stuff on shore. So this is very much a multi-agency problem. So there's a huge coordination issue that happens. But the aim of Spear is really to shorten all those timelines. So like Transcom, they have logistics modeling tools, much like we have all of our high fidelity physics simulation tools at ERDC that are very world-class, exquisite tools. They take a lot to set up and run, but they give you great answers. Transcom has that too, right? So they can model the logistics process and give you, aircraft tail numbers and set up, the whole chain, and they do a great job of that. The challenge is, how do we do this at scale? How do we do this at speed, right? So in a contested environment, we don't have all of the nice port surveys that have been done that Transcom does. They have roughly 600 ports around the world where they go out and they do surveys every few years to sort of check the facilities and see how many cranes they have and make sure structural capacity is still good, things like that. All the rest of the ports around the world, they don't, because obviously time and money, it's a lot of effort to do these things. So that's where we come in, right? So we've got the database with the backup ports, right? So that we can say, okay, this isn't your first choice, right? That's the whole point of contested logistics, right? We're on to backup choice, not going to your first choice. Right? How do we fix it? How do we assess it? How do we go, how quickly is it feasible? Is this like, it's going to take me 10 days to offload my ship or 2 days? Like, what am I even looking at, right? That's a decision the commander is trying to figure out from the very beginning, right there, back to square zero, trying to figure out a new plan. And they need to explore the space of like, what is possible? How quickly could things happen, right? So that's where, like, if we start with port, right, they're going to say, what is even feasible? Like, where can I fit my ship, right? Or do I need to be offshore and do a lots operation? Then from there, we can go into the throughput and say, okay, well, what's the value of this location? How long does it actually take me to get stuff offshore, right? Or off the ship and onto the shore? Is it days, weeks? Like, how long? Right? That key turnaround is really critical to the fight and the plan, right? Then the armor the structural capacity really gives us is this feasible, right? Can we do it, right? And so right now, each of those pieces is a multi-day effort by multiple people trying to go, okay, can we, like, let's work up a logistics process here and go, how quickly, run through the paper and pencil and plug it into the Transcom codes and set it up and run, right? To do one scenario it takes quite a while, hours to days to weeks for really complicated scenarios, right? We want to reduce that to seconds.
Right.
That's the whole aim there. So we can rough in and say, okay, if you had XYZ of your moving equipment, the big rough container handlers or trucks and things like that, how quickly could you get all your stuff offshore?
Right.
The other side of the scenario that we enable is playing the so what game, right? So in a logistics scenario, your material handling equipment is really the key variable that you get to play with and go, okay, let me put 2 of these here, 3 of these here, 2 of these here, and go, right? Then everybody sort of moves along their segment of the chain and really start to build up a chain of sequences that has to happen. But the question is, well, what if you put 3 here versus 2 here, right? So you have 3 rough container handlers, or you've got 5 trucks, or what happens if a truck goes down, right? The next question the commander wants to know is, okay, you've told me my best throughput is 46 hours and 25 minutes, right? Okay, well, what happens if one container handler goes down or a truck goes down? Does that go to, 2 hours more or 40 hours more, right? Wow. What's my sensitivity to my sets of material handling equipment, right? To do that, you've got to run thousands of scenarios to go, let's play with this space to go, okay, if you only have 2 or 3 or 4 in each of these little slots along my chain, or 5 or 6 or 8, what does that get me? What does that buy me? How much do I lose in terms of time and efficiency? And so with our throughput analysis that we can run in a second or two, right? Now all of a sudden that opens us up to running thousands and tens of thousands of these scenarios, so that which is just not feasible if you're trying to run the exquisite, expensive models, right?
Right.
So now we've opened up a whole new way of allowing commanders to have insight into their logistics process and understand how their equipment sets influence their throughput. And if one goes down or 2 goes down, like what's their best, course of action? Is it move one from here to there, or is it be like, tell the other commanders, we're just going to be stuck here. We got 20 more hours. We just don't have enough equipment.
So when you're talking about that and how you can go through these what if scenarios, are commanders or the decision makers, are they able to understand, okay, if we know this is the worst case scenario, what do we do to change this? Like, can this help change the actual scenario that they were originally thinking about?
Exactly. That's the whole goal, right? So we can play these what if scenarios and go, okay, at port A, right? We have our equipment sets. What does that give us? Maybe it's, 36 hours, but if we lose one, now we're up to, 56 hours. At port B, it may take us 38 hours, but if we lose one, we're at 40 hours, right? We're still better off. So maybe port B is a less risky scenario, right? So by enabling all of these scenarios and being able to quickly run thousands of these simulations, we inform a lot of this risk assessment that the commanders want to have and want to look at, but they just don't have now, right? Because of how time intensive all of these throughput calculations are.
That's absolutely amazing. Can you walk us through how these tools also support throughput assessment under degraded conditions? So places that, like you said, are not our first choice of going into.
Exactly. So that's where the other half of SPEAR comes in, where we have the structural capacity, right? Where we pull up the sump here and it's like looking a bit sketchy, and you're like, I don't know if this is going to work, right? Well, the commander's going to send out some engineers. They're going to do some surveys, take a bunch of pictures, and start to look around. They've got other tools that ERDC has developed, the MARV, to sort of do underwater surveys and sort of assess like how good is stuff, right? Are we missing piles? Are we missing like whole sections of the pier? Right? So then we can take that data in and quickly pull it in and start to create the repair plans. And that lets us get at, okay, if this was working good, if we spent the extra, 2 days, whatever, to repair this, that gets us all of our stuff, if we go back to the throughput, onshore in 36 hours or whatever it is, right? So now we can start to look at where we've got degraded environments, and maybe it's the beach, right? We've got to sort of go, okay, if I use my beach, how does that compare to fixing the pier? If I use the beach, but it takes me 85 hours, I fix the pier and it takes me, 36 hours plus 24, maybe close, but I can still get better here, right? So look at my throughput, my cost, and now I start to look at my equipment sets that I have to bring in order to actually be in the fight for this contested logistics scenario.
So how do these tools enable the identification? You talked about identifying, okay, you have port A and port B. So does this reduce reliance on vulnerable infrastructure that we already have?
Yeah, so right now the Transcom's focuses on their 600 world-class ports, right? Which they're good. Those are like definitely, if you can use one of those, you use one of those. They have the equipment. That's choice A. You want to go there, right? And it's really about how do we come back and go, we're not at choice A. What can the mission support? What do we need? Do we need, how many acres of storage do we need? Can we see that? Can we pull that up? If we only have a smaller storage area, how does that change our throughput and scenario, our timings, right? There's a lot of small decisions in a logistics analysis that add up to big changes at the very end. And when you have degraded environments, if you've lost a pier or you're on the small pier instead of the big pier, right? Now you have to start aggregating all of those little effects into one big cumulative assessment, and then place that in the context of, okay, here's my other option, right? Plan B, plan C, but also here's my ultimate objective, right? If I'm at plan A, but it takes me a little bit longer, but I get there quicker, but plan B is, a little bit faster, but it takes me longer to get there, right? How do those things all interplay together? And so by having the tools that let us make these fine adjustments and sort of lay out, here's the different options, and sort of show the commanders here's your throughput plots. That's what they want to see at the end of the day, right? Here's how fast you get to your objective. Right. That's what they want to see. So that's how we get to work with degraded environments and infrastructure that's less than ideal, right?
So the last question I have for you is, if I'm a commander and I'm like, wow, this Spear and Port app sounds amazing, I want to use it, how do they get access to it?
So right now, Ports is live. It's on our web app platform, the USACE Small Interface platform. So we're happy to provide all the DOW people the link. It only takes your CAT card to log into it. The Spear tools, we're in the middle of developing those right now. So it's a 3-year project, and we're year 1.5 right now. But if anybody's interested, we will happily show them the preview and work through questions with them. So probably still be like an RFI process right now.
Right. So RFI process for the Spear, but Port is ready to go, and all you need is a CAT card, and you're able to access all that information. And so for the listening audience or the viewers, if you have any questions for Dr. Byrd, all you have to do is send an email to erdicinfo@usace.army.mil, erdicinfo@usace.army.mil. We're going to have links to Port and information on how you can get to that in our show notes on the resource page at poweroferdicpodcast.org, poweroferdicpodcast.org, where you'll have the link to Port along with how to reach out to Dr. Byrd. Thank you so much, and thank you to our audience for listening today.